So in this part of the letter that Paul has written to one of his proteges, Timothy, Paul is sounding like a man who is facing his mortality. That he's realizing that perhaps his days are numbered, that his life is drawing to an end, and he's looking back on his ministry, looking back on the churches that he's established, that he's served, the people that he's known, and he's wondering, though he has certainty, that in that rear view mirror he is seeing in his life past that he's done something meaningful with his life. And more than that, he's done something that serves God. Every Sunday morning, you hear me say to you that you are out in the world being the good news. That you're doing those little things that bring meaning to the lives of others, and that can bring meaning to your life. That when you are maybe driving someone to their chemo treatments, you're meeting a need that they have, and you are being the good news to them. We as the church are called to be that good news so that when people see what we're doing, when they look in their rear view mirror on their lives, they'll see not only us, but they will see Jesus Christ. Now, Erik Erikson is the well-known developmental psychologist who mapped out the framework, the scaffolding for this thing called old age. And he tells a story to make his point about the task of old age, about an old man who's on his deathbed, surrounded by his family, and as he lay on his bed with his eyes closed, his wife whispered gently into his ear the names of all of those who were gathered around him to wish him shalom. And as she finished naming everyone at the bedside, he bolted up suddenly and said, "Then who's minding the store?" When we get to the end of our lives, of course, we want to make sure that our highest priority isn't wondering, what's the work that's left undone? But when we look in our rearview mirror, that we'll see that we've lived a good life of being the good news for others. And Paul is teaching us that scaffolding for a good life is the scaffolding for being the good news for others. And so the first thing he says is, fight the good fight. If you want to have a meaningful life, you need to have purpose. You have to have a cause that you're willing to suffer for. There needs to be some kind of struggle. And it doesn't have to be your struggle. It doesn't have to be your fight. But it can be the struggle of someone who's in need. And not only to see and recognize when someone has a need and someone has a fight, but to step in. To step in and to show up for that fight. So that the other can see by our presence that they are not alone. So in 1936, as the world approached the Olympic Games to be held in Berlin, in Nazi Germany, with the rise of Hitler and fascism, there was this debate in many countries around the world, but in particular in the U.S., as to whether they should boycott those Olympic Games. And the debate went this way: if we If we don't show up, if we boycott, we can send a message to Hitler that we disagree with what he's doing and that we oppose him. And on the other side, there was the counter-argument, if we don't go, then we can't show him, as the rest of the world, that his illusion of the Aryan race being the superior race, that it is an illusion, that it's wrong. And as you know, the side that won out was, we'll go. And by going, it allowed Jesse Owens to break a record that stood for a few generations, winning 4 gold medals and demonstrating that white supremacy is an illusion, and there's something deeper that holds us together than separating us by the color of our skin. Paul, in his letter to Timothy, is saying, when I was having my hardship, when I was having my difficulties, nobody showed up. Nobody came to my rescue. No one stood with me in my fight. And we all understand that. We've had our struggles where we have no evidence that anyone cares at all to stand with us. And we feel alone. More so, those who don't have good news in their lives, left wondering, who's going to stand with me? Now, I'm sure the choir, you've all downloaded Kanye West's latest album that dropped this week. Anyone? Am I alone in the room? No one else is a Kanye West fan? Well, I can always count on you.
It's kind of lame.
Jennifer? Yes. So Kanye, sorry, what did you say?
Kind of lame, actually.
You think it's kind of lame? No, not lame at all. But the lyrics, we're not going to listen to the music. We're going to take a look at the lyrics. And Kanye makes this point in his lyrics that in his own struggle to figure out what he's going to do, the people who left him feeling abandoned as he wrestled with how do I express a belief in God were Christians. And we tend to do that. We'll leave our own hanging in many ways rather than saying, you know what, I'm with you despite how it is that you may be living your life and what struggles you have. But instead, we'll tend to judge people. That's what Paul's playing around with here. That there's a fight to be had, and if you don't notice it, then you can't show up and stand with people. But he says, even if that doesn't happen, the God that I want to glorify is a God who stands with us. My God stands with me in my difficult times. The first piece of scaffolding in the good life and being the good news is making sure that you notice the fight. The second piece of scaffolding in that is to make sure that you finish the race that you start. It's not enough to see the fight. It's not enough to simply be in the fight. It's not enough to simply be in the race, but you need to follow through and finish. You don't have to win, you just have to finish the race. Now, in the 1936 Olympic Games, of course, Jesse Owens, he finished the race and he won. But finishing the race means that someone is going to recognize what you've done so that your cause is understood as being righteous. And of course, the debate was, will Hitler recognize this accomplishment by this black African American in a country where Hitler is trying to create the illusion that the white Aryan race is supreme? And this is where it gets interesting in the history books. That although the public didn't get to see Hitler congratulate Jesse Owens, he claims that he was acknowledged by Hitler. And that his point of pain was that when he returned to the U.S., FDR, remember we talked about FDR last week, but Roosevelt didn't recognize it. Roosevelt didn't invite him to the White House to shake his hand and to say that what you've done is important, and let's think as a country about our own racism. If the fight isn't finished, then it doesn't get recognized. And if it's not recognized, we're unable to tell the world, things need to change. Look at this one fight, this one race that I've had. Take a look at this one person who's in difficulty and extrapolate from there to how the world needs to change so that we can live the good news. And so Paul is saying, when I finish the race, I got recognized. I will be recognized by God, not because I'm great, but because the fight that I'm fighting is great. There will be a crown of righteousness for me. More Kanye West. Kanye, you won't ever be the same when you call on Jesus' name. We need to make sure as Christians that we invite God to our White House. That we make sure that we acknowledge the struggles that God champions in our world for those who live on the margins. And that we say there is an outcome from this struggle, from this race. And that outcome is someone's going to be saved. There will be salvation. And in Kanye's case, he's saying, I was made sane. I was healed. Paul is saying, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness because God is with me and God is making sure that I'm strengthened for that race. That's the second piece of scaffolding, finishing the race. And the third piece of scaffolding is keeping the faith. Keeping the faith is about seeing that our race is part of something bigger than ourselves. It's part of a larger vision for how the world should be. And when we hear talk of the kingdom of God, that's talk of God's vision for how this world can be despite the struggles that people face. When Jesse Owens arrived in Berlin in 1936, and he was in the athletes' village, the Olympic Village. Before the games began, he was approached by another man named Adolf. It wasn't Hitler, but Adolf Dassler. And Adolf Dassler was a cobbler. He made shoes. And he was part owner of the Dassler Brothers shoe factory. And he saw an opportunity. And that was, if he could get Jesse Owens to wear his shoes, that he'd have a brand ambassador internationally for him. And he offered these shoes to Jesse Owens, and Jesse Owens accepted them, and he won them, and they were part of his victory. And you could say that Jesse Owens became the first sponsorship athlete. Wearing these shoes by Adolf Dassler, whose friends called him Addy Dassler, who founded Adidas. We have an opportunity to be brand ambassadors for the cause that we fight. As Paul puts it, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed. So that when people see us and they see the shoes that we're wearing, they see the one who has sent us and equipped us. That they see not only those who have a fight and are struggling, they see more than just us being recognized for the cause that we're championing, but we can see the bigger vision, that we can see God at work in the world through us. More Kanye, worship Christ with the best of your portions. That when we sacrifice, we give God the best of what we have. It's so that also the world can see that God matters. So that they won't forget who has sent us. And that when we run the race and we're strengthened, people will know that someone has sent us. As Paul says, to him be the glory forever and ever. That when we fight the fight and we finish the race, that we keep the faith so that the world sees that God is at work, and that maybe in all of that, they'll come to glorify God. In your life, and let me end with this, in your day-to-day living, whatever you have going on, your opportunity to be the good news for others is scaffolding for you to have the good life. Not the life of wealth and of fame, but a life that when you are on your deathbed and you look in the rearview mirror at your life, that you'll be lifted up knowing that you have fought the good fight, that you finished a race that mattered, and that along the way you kept the faith in a way that inspired others to see God's vision for the world. Amen.